Sick Harrison Price for Tuesday, January 21st, 2025, coming to you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee here at the historic Wall Center. In this show, a presentation of Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. So, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION when opening that account. Matt Sakaris alongside Blake Price and former world log rolling champion Mike Rogerson.
Who knew?
He is full of surprises. Who else has a trophy case with Juno Awards and a world log rolling championship?
Next time you try to tell us that there's nobody in here that's a world champion, that's an athlete, look at our log rolling
Just
champion.
think of what we haven't done with our lives, Blake. He's a world champion. He's got 4 Junos.
He's traveled.
There is no achievement on this side of the ledger.
He has traveled everywhere in rural North America.
Right.
Entertaining tens of people in the world of logging sports.
We learned something about Mike this weekend. We got a big show planned for you. I mean, it's not log rolling, but we'll do our best. And we will start with the Surrey Mitsubishi poll question. Are you willing to take less on a JT Miller trade just to end the soap opera? You can vote yes. You can vote no. Do so at the Sick Harrison Price X and YouTube channels. Blake Price, what says you?
It's a calculated gamble, isn't it? Because there is certainly a universe in which I see the Canucks taking less. The air gets let out of the room in a good way. Elias Pettersson exhales for the first time in months, maybe years. And Pettersson returns to former glory. And players X and Y that are retrieved in the trade do just fine. They're not going to be point per game like Miller, but they're fine. But the whole, all ships rise as the water comes in, if you will. And then I see another world where they accept less. Nothing changes on the ice with the rest of the players in the Vancouver Canucks, and they're just worse.
And then I think you are resigned to a full team makeover around Quinn Hughes. I voted yes because I think this is the position they're in. I think they have crossed this bridge themselves. I mean, if Hedel, Lindgren, and a first was something the Vancouver Canucks were going to do, then
I'll play devil's advocate and say yes, say no, because I think there's enough rumor, innuendo, smoke, if you will, that I think somebody's going to arrive at fair market value. Okay. One of these teams will arrive at fair market value.
As I've been saying from the jump on this, I'm not defeatist. I'm not certain it is going to be a bad trade. I think there is still a world where they can make a good trade. I think it's a narrower and narrower channel by day. Although if he has another 2-point night and is great in a hard match against whomever from Buffalo tonight. But, you know, let's look at the facts. So the Vancouver Canucks are going to position this with would-be trade partners is he's a top 2 center. How often do they become available?
Yeah.
He's an adept passer, finisher, and a guy you can hard match against the other team's best player. I'm not sure I'd call him an all-situations center because I'm not sure he's a great penalty killer or should do penalty killing. But if you wanted to say 200-foot setter at his best, yes, he is that.
Despite his age, he has not gotten painfully slow yet.
Exactly.
No.
31 going on 32 with club control at a fixed number that was set before these jumps in the salary cap.
Are we doing a digital brochure right now?
Somewhat, yeah. That he brings energy and emotion and things that fans are going to get behind. You know, New York Islanders seem to have an enthusiasm gap right now. Would he fix that? And then other teams are going to come back to him and say, He's nearly 32. His production is down. He has been a problem in the room. And so somewhere in the middle there, you're likely to find your fulcrum, your meeting point.
In talking about this, I think I've stumbled upon a poll for later in the week, perhaps.
Okay.
Is JT Miller's attitude and personality a help or a hindrance to the trade?
Well, I think right now it's a hindrance.
Yeah?
Yeah. Well, I mean, take a look at everything that's going on, right?
Because in looking around the league,
because that's the other thing other teams are going to position back at the Canucks. Oh, so you want us to pay for the privilege to import this problem to our dressing room?
I saw somebody.
That's what they're going to say.
I saw somebody from the East type out today. Getting his prickliness and attitude into the Carolina room is exactly what the Hurricanes need. So, which is true?
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a chance that Rangers fans think getting Miller into that room is actually going to be a help for that room.
Yeah. But thinking this out further, the whole league knows Miller wants out, the Canucks want out of Miller. Not to mention you have a July 1st deadline with Elias Pettersson where his no-movement clause kicks in, so you're working against that clock. So you are in a position of weakness. You don't have the leverage. The phrase addition by subtraction is even quite prominent at this stage of the game. With those of us on the outside looking in, they haven't said that, to be fair. So, yeah, I voted yes. I leave out hope that it could be no. But as somebody said, Pucker Glenn says to me, no, loud no. It's been reported by that as many as 5 or 6 teams are interested. That screams his true value, and there should drive a bidding war. No way they should settle for another team's Raymond Ballard and a third. I think it'll be better than Raymond Ballard and a third. But I hear what you're saying. How about this from Surrey Mitsubishi? They are providing a special offer to secure some price audience members. If you've been turned down for financing at other dealerships, Surrey Mitsubishi has assigned Jessica, a dedicated representative who's committed to getting you through their in-house financing program. She's going to assist bad credit, negative equity on your current car. Jessica will apply the special program for you and do everything possible and make sure you are approved. Email Jessica at surreymitsubishi.com. Make sure you mention secure some price to get in on this program. Some conditions apply. Surrey Mitsubishi, 13820 104th Avenue in Surrey. Top story brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, Foolish Winery. And we'll get back to Miller here in a second. But first, 3-game suspensions for both Connor McDavid and Tyler Myers. And Edmonton is big mad, Blake.
Woo! And they can't decide, they can't come up with a single unified reason as to what they are mad about. That's the funny thing.
They're not protecting stars. So here's the thing.
They're not protecting that star. That's the level of tinfoil. They think it's just about 97.
Before we start the ridicule, the analysis of what's coming out of the Alberta Capital, I will throw Edmonton 3 bones. Absolutely, Connor Garland should have got a penalty for holding Connor McDavid. As Ferraro said on the broadcast, there's 3 penalties there.
But it wouldn't have been to their advantage.
We discussed that yesterday.
Yeah.
Number 2, yes, National Hockey League referees should call penalties when players, and I draw no distinction between star and regular players, but needless to say, star players are going to handle the puck more. So yes, let's call the rule book. Let's make sure that players who do handle the puck more often, star players, Connor McDavid, when they are hooked, when they are held, when they are cross-checked, when they are elbow interfered with, the whole kit and caboodle, let's call those penalties. You remember they came out of the lockout and they were calling everything? Players adapted. And if you have players who can adapt, well, they're probably not NHL-worthy players. So I'll throw that bone. I will throw them that bone as well. And then the third bone I'll throw. I was absolutely shocked that McDavid got 3 games.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I thought both guys would get at least one. I held out a sliver of possibility that McDavid would get nothing. Just because they would look at, he was held, there was no penalty. But I thought both guys would get one game. I thought it was likely that Tyler Myers may get a second game just because his was away from the play, delivered with more force, if you will. So I'm a little surprised that McDavid is being sat down for 3 games, particularly in a showdown with Alex Ovechkin. Not to mention the rematch against the Canucks on Thursday.
I would have thought every other combo except this one. 1-1, 1-2, 2 for Myers. 1-3, 3 for Myers. 2-2, 2-3. 3-3 was not on my bingo
exactly.
card.
I'm with you 100%, Blake. Like when I saw that yesterday afternoon, I'm like, I'll be damned. They're sitting McDavid down 3 times? Whew. Didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
Let's also draw this important distinction. Connor Garland was holding Connor McDavid. Mm-hmm. He was not assaulting Connor McDavid.
Yeah.
So we talk about protecting stars. Like, I didn't think Connor McDavid for a second was in any kind of risk of physical harm on that play. Did you?
Nope. And Matt, couple that with the fact that Connor McDavid is not keeping track of both referees and whether their arms are in the air.
Correct.
For all McDavid knew, there was an arm in the air, and the whistle wasn't going because his team had the puck and were fully set up 6-on-5. So he reacted the way he did, regardless of whether or not there was a penalty coming on the play. Mm-hmm. People are missing that. Like, he's completely still missing cross-checking Garland.
Yeah, I mean, they're missing the distinction between being held and being assaulted. They're missing that distinction. And, of course, the correct play, the play that you're coached at the NHL level, if one of those arms does go up from an official, get the puck to a Vancouver Canuck immediately, get your stoppage of play, right?
But here's the thing.
Your advantage.
Here's the thing on that. Let's walk through that. So they often do. They'll throw it in the corner waiting for that Canuck player knows also, I'm not going to do this.
You got to put it on a stick or in his skates. You can't put it to a free space. You got to put it right so that a Canuck absolutely handles the puck.
But we've also seen where a Canuck recoils, and the ref will eventually blow the play down on that, but they'll wait 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And the Oilers didn't have seconds to spare. Mm-hmm. Like, it played out the way it was going to play out in all scenarios.
So here we go. Bob Stauffer, longtime Edmonton talk show host, analyst for Oilers games on Sportsnet. Vancouver, 0 cups, 2 riots.
I don't even know what that's in relation to.
I just think he's big mad. He's Mr. Edmonton, Bob. And he's not wrong. I'm not sure where that equates to this argument, but okay. Corey Perry, beacon of judgment.
Yeah.
And wisdom. Why aren't we protecting the superstars? Every other league does it. Mahomes, LeBron, they protect their superstars. Corey Perry. And I'd always said this about Perry. He is a whiny so-and-so on the ice. He's typically not all that whiny in interviews. When he is available, he's kind of a really soft-spoken, quiet sort of guy. But there you go. His on-ice persona was matched in the off-ice interviews.
So here's the thing that Edmonton fans don't like is since McDavid has entered the league, no one has drawn more penalties than, guess who? Connor McDavid.
Yep.
And outside of pests who are kind of close to him, the Brad Marchands and Tom Wilsons are kind of close to him. But in terms of just pure skill players that aren't creating chaos and garnering penalties for themselves and others all at the same time, which is why pests are near the top of the league there. The closest skill player to Connor McDavid is Nathan MacKinnon, as one would guess. McDavid has 344 penalties since he entered the league drawn. McKinnon is at 283. 61 penalties.
That's a sizable gap.
In arrears. Not minutes. Penalties. We're talking 2 hours more worth of penalties drawn for Connor McDavid. The guy gets calls. He gets calls just fine.
TSN's Ryan Rashog. Some suggestions out there that McDavid could or should scale back his involvement in league activity / media as protest over the suspension. My understanding is that's not his headspace at all. He'll continue to conduct himself the same as he always has. Well, when he's suspended, I imagine he's not doing any interviews. Is this a nod to he should skip the Four Nations in protest? I can't see that happening just because Connor McDavid, sadly, because of the greed of NHL franchise owners, is amongst this cohort of players that has never played internationally at a best-on-best.
It's silly. I don't even know if I can address it.
And then here is legendary Edmonton sports columnist Terry Jones, who's trying to look on the bright side of life. McDavid's suspension could be a good thing. Massive reaction around the sports world paints the NHL as a joke. Owners got to be pissed. Firings, officiating expose, protecting stars, possible positive fallout. That stat of 97 being 197th place player in drawing penalties says it all. Explain the context of 197th placed player in terms of drawing penalties.
Well,
that's for this year?
Yes, okay. That's for this year. So the suggestion now I've seen from a couple players, well, we don't mean
so the referees have backed off calling penalties
this year only, okay. And just on McDavid.
All right.
It's a grand conspiracy, and remember, they get different referees every night, so it's not one guy's got it in for McDavid. A bunch of guys have commiserated on this. They've decided they're going to get Connor McDavid for some reason. They're going to slow down the game, make it less interesting, less entertaining, have fewer goals. The NHL will not break off any phone calls to say, guys, just wondering why you're... None of that will happen. There'll be no oversight. And everyone is just going to not talk about it. Number of power plays per game has really not gone down to any demonstrable...
I like Terry a lot, but I think he is misguided when he thinks that there's going to be massive reaction around the sports world. I don't think a single person in the NFL gives a shit about the length of Connor McDavid's suspension. They're in the midst of conference championship games. They're not peering over to the hockey world and going, I can't believe they suspended that McDavid guy in 3 games.
No.
I don't think owners will be pissed here because the 3 games in question are all home games for the Edmonton Oilers against Washington, Vancouver, and Saturday against Buffalo. I don't think a single ticket dollar is going to be lost.
I think
what is a fantastic sports city that has always supported the Oilers even when the team was dreadful.
I think any casual American fan that caught wind that the best player in the league got suspended for 3 games would investigate on social media. What did he do? And they're going to see what he did. They're going to be like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, that's because the standard of offenses in hockey is much lower than it is in other sports, right?
Yeah.
Like that Texans linebacker got 3 games and 3 out of 17, not 3 out of 82 for his vicious helmet-to-helmet hit a few weeks ago.
To be fair, I don't think...
the NHL has lived in this world for a long time. It's the only sport that sanctions fighting to some degree, right? Yeah. So the NHL is accustomed to being a punchline. That is their that is their existence in the United States.
The most lenient Oiler take I've had on this is... No, he deserved to be suspended. That's suspended.
Yeah,
but
I've seen a lot of that from Oilers.
And he probably reacts in that same way even if there's a penalty coming because he wouldn't have known.
Yep.
But he was really taking out his frustration on the whole year not having penalties called.
Fair.
So again, when you're super frustrated about something that's happened to you all year, not at the hands of Connor Garland, by other gentlemen, you're going to take out your frustrations with a dangerous, vicious cross-check to the guy who merely... held you.
Yeah. Wits end tracks for me. That this was a culmination, an accumulation of fouls and perceived fouls over the course of the season that weren't called. this one beyond the pale, right? As we've talked about, it's a very smart tactical play in the last dying seconds with the goaltender out and protecting a 1-goal lead. But it is way beyond the pale in terms of what you typically see in an NHL game, and absolutely should have been a penalty.
How many times has Sid been suspended? Has he been suspended?
Good question.
He certainly has had retaliatory penalties for the same frustration. Sid's big case, if you remember, folks, we haven't heard it in a while from Sid, but was the slashes on the wrist.
Well, that was the same with McDavid.
He was sick and tired of getting slashed on the wrist.
We've heard that about McDavid. We used to hear that about Johnny Gaudreau in Calgary, right? Berkey went on a big rant about that once upon a time. And that is one of the tactics, right? Like just continue to be that pebble in their shoe, slashing at the wrist, little tiny slashes, little tiny hooks in the hands.
I mean, my daughter's team played a team coached by a former National Hockey League player on the weekend. And I couldn't help but notice that team, more than any team I've ever witnessed, slashing on the wrist. So I think it gets passed down as a way to get away with it and disrupt the play.
And there were a lot of mature takes, as you say, in Edmonton. I mean, our colleagues over at Oilers Nation both said both had no problems with 3-game suspensions. In fact, probably had less problems than, or certainly were less surprised than we were about 3 games.
In my mind's eye, though, I can see Sid whipping around and slashing a guy's shins. I feel like that's happened. I don't know that I can recall Sid in his imminent frustration doing something like this.
I think McDavid is more of a Popovsky than Sid. I think that's clear. Just like Gretzky was more of a Popovsky than Mario.
Yes.
I mean, to watch Gretzky was an ongoing discussion with the officials at every stoppage that he was on the ice.
Yeah. Mario had the same feelings and thoughts, but just didn't exude them.
Or was far more subtle in the way he delivered them with the officiating, with the officials, the on-ice officials. So anyways, the upshot here is both Myers and McDavid are going to miss the rematch on Thursday. And I caught what Biz Nasty and Ryan Whitney were saying on Spitting Chicklets about what a miss by the Department of Player Safety. That you want these sort of storylines. You want this sort of ominous narrative hanging over that game in the buildup. Oh, what's going to happen after they got into it at the end of Saturday? That these are the sorts of things that stoke rivalry, stoke interest, stoke eyeballs, and particularly third-party eyeballs, not just Canucks and Oilers.
I can see both sides of it.
Yeah,
in a world where there's been so many lawsuits already about concussions and all that sort of thing, they have to abide by player safety, and yet they are an entertainment product. So Biz has got that part right, that
for sure.
You get a lot of eyeballs on that game if Myers and McDavid are back in the lineup. If you go 1-1 on the suspensions, I think that's a big destination hockey game on Thursday.
That's monster.
Like, it's the kind of game where, and I remember this late in the season, I subscribed to Sport. I wanted to see, an Avs Oilers game late last season. I subscribed to an app to get that game.
To watch that game.
Yep. Do you get subscriptions based on that game alone?
Yeah.
Like, you might.
Yeah. Not quite of a more Bertuzzi pitch, but somewhere down the queue, would you?
Well, in a good way, because that one was so grave with consequential injuries that you almost felt guilty.
I'm talking about going into the game. Although they had played. And anyways, what are our friends at Yellow Dog up to?
Well, they want to remind you that it's that time of year to get fabulous new beers, like the Good Time West Coast IPA from Neighborhood Brewing. It's just released, bold, crisp, delicious brew made with Simcoe, Citra, and Mosaic hops, giving it big tropical citrus and pine notes. That's just the kind of IPA I like, and because it's a West Coast IPA, relatively crushable.
Yeah,
as they like to say.
Speaking of crushable, those Mel's New Zealand Pilsners, the crisp ones.
A few crushed?
Yeah. Well, there were some big football games this weekend, forgive me, and including last night. Okay, so we're getting more details And the story about JT Miller and the Vancouver Canucks is getting fleshed out a little more, including with a bit more specifics on the timeline. Farhan Lalji saying a confrontation following the benching against Nashville on Grey Cup Sunday in November. Of course, what followed from there, a 10-game leave of absence. Who was the confrontation with? Don't know if it was Elias. Don't know if it was Rick Tocchet, but you may remember Tocchet was asked about his relationship with JT that week and answered, well, you should ask him, before going on to answer the question. But his knee-jerk, I think, was a little bit telling there, because we had always believed that Tocchet and Miller were copacetic, on the same page, pushing things forward in the same direction with a lot of intensity, fire, emotion, all the things that unite both personalities, right?
And in terms of guessing, it is just guessing. I mean, the coach is the one that benched him in the third period.
Right.
So
Brock Besser spoke on this yesterday. It's been an interesting year, a lot of injuries, some distractions and stuff. Boy, when you got players, speaking the words, distractions and stuff. And then it can be tough to block everything out. Sometimes I feel it affects our team in some games. And there you go, right? There's the longest serving member of the Vancouver Canucks, a guy who I think it's fair to say, from the best of our knowledge, is beloved by all quarters of the room. Who doesn't like Brock, right? And there he is talking about distractions and how it affects the team's game. Now, Dollywall says the Canucks realized 6 weeks ago that something had to give, meaning, and again, do the math, we're the third week of January here, meaning around the time that JT Miller was coming back from his leave of absence, the Canucks realized, okay, it's not happening, right? That whatever they were hoping for out of that break, out of that timeout for Miller, was not a cure-all. Now, Biznasty says Miller has requested a trade. I would suspect if JT or his agent were asked that would be denied. This could very well be the semantics game. I think it has been clear for some time that JT would not invoke the no-move clause for a change of scenery. I think that has been clear to the Canucks for some time now, that JT understands as well as they do that it's time for a change of scenery. Biznasty saying he added to Aquilini, who he bumped into, do not give him away for Heedle at a first, make the trade in the summer.
Yeah.
And if you know people who have worked with Aquilini, oftentimes the guy he spoke to last is the thing that gets brought into their orbit. So interesting to see if Francesco is going to take the good counsel of Paul Biznasty Bissonnette.
Back to the Tocchet comments. Were you talking about today's quote about the locker room stuff?
Brock?
No, you said creeping into the room. Was that Brock that said that in that quote that you had?
Yes, it was Brock.
Oh, okay. Well, because Tocchet kind of doubled down on that today as well.
Yeah.
In his post game day skate routine, saying whether it was the fault, our fault, or somebody else's fault, it's gotten into the locker room. And that's where it gets interesting with regards to tonight's game versus the Sabres is, they've been able to peel off one-off wins in the last 7 weeks, 8 weeks, but they can't really get anything together to get any sort of momentum.
No consecutive home wins since November.
No consecutive wins, period, since November 29th, December 1st. No consecutive wins in regulation, which they have the chance to do here tonight, since the 23rd and 26th out on the road of November, 4-3 over Ottawa, 2-0 over Boston. So, to me, you look at the wins-loss, you look at the schedules I'm looking at right now, that's a team in disarray. Sure, one night you can get a few bounces, a couple things can go your way, everybody's forgotten about it for one night, and you can get a win. But the fact they can't carry any sort of momentum forward leads you to believe that, things are not well in that room. Because there's enough talent in that room to win back-to-back games sometime over a 2-month span.
Oh, of course. No doubt. No doubt. Now, Frank Saravelli says some teams who would otherwise be suitors are scared off by the drama of all of this. I'm not surprised there. I had a conversation with someone last week who said he knew his guys in a certain market were like, ooh, I don't want to touch any of this. In isolation, I would love JT Miller. I would love Elias Pettersson. But given what I'm hearing there, I'm just going to play the spectator role on this. Let someone else get in on that. But Saravelli adds, and to his credit, JT is not weaponizing his no-move clause as he could, and that there are more teams that he would accept a deal to than one might think. Translation, he just wants out. And, that part is great. But, getting back to our pantomime negotiation there about how this comes together, when he signed the contract extension a couple years ago on that Friday, Labor Day, what do we all say? Well, if JT keeps up the way JT has been playing, the Canucks are going to get a ton of value out of this contract in the early years. And it's going to be the latter years that are a problem with the contract as the player gets older into his mid-30s. The Canucks have exacted a couple of years of value of that contract, right? So the term that's left there, you're going to have other teams go back and go, well, contract goes through 29-30. What are the chances that he's still going to be an effective player at that point? And that's fair. This is the bed the Canucks made, both on the contract extension and letting it get to this point. If you want to take a harsh view on this, and I know many of you are already out there doing so on social media, Jim Rutherford and Patrick Alvin and Rick Tocchet knew that JT and Elias was a combustible situation, and they thought they could fix it or keep it under wraps or forge forward with it to the benefit of the Vancouver Canucks. They did not view it as a ticking time bomb, or if they did, they felt they had more time. That is now clearly a miscalculation.
Okay,
benefit of hindsight, but clearly a miscalculation there.
I mean, I don't know.
I don't think Rutherford and Tocchet believed in Pettersson as a frontline, we can win a championship with that guy to begin with. And I'm not sure they've seen anything in their years here that would change that opinion. And particularly if they felt, the remedy here is to toughen Elias up and basically green light JT to doing that. If that was the path forward here, that was a gross miscalculation. That's not knowing Elias in the least. And you can criticize Elias for that, and that's fair game too. But you needed to resolve this one way or the other to the benefit of the Vancouver Canucks. And the paths that they have chosen here clearly did not do that.
I have no doubt in my mind that in the moment that contract was signed, it was at a relatively low simmer, that they didn't think that it was going to rear its ugly head.
JT's or Elias's?
Both, particularly JT's. Let's go with JT's. And I do think they saw, and we still see it to this point. I mean, he has a couple of good games. He's back on a point per game pace. That's how close he is. Pettersson's farther. I think an acquiring team can look at his contract right now and suppose that he's going to be the same player for at least 2 more additional years. At which point, yes, he may become a third-line center for you. But let's see what the cap is like in 27 and 28, where an $8 million cap is slotting as a higher-paid third-line center, but I don't think it'll be crazy.
Okay. It's 2 more years, you said?
Two more addition. I think it's reasonable to expect 2 more additional years of high performance, so that come 27, 28.
That's including this year or 2 more beyond?
2 more beyond.
Okay.
I don't think that's crazy for him to be an 80-point player. In fact, I would put a sum of money on that. That he will average a point per game through to the end of 26-27.
He's not there this year, but he's not far off.
2 games off.
Possible.
And then
possible. I don't think you're going to get any trade partners who say, yeah, I agree with you. Absolutely. Yeah, I think the contract will age well right till the end.
No, but they're going to believe in their own heart of hearts. They're going to position
the other way. Okay.
They're going to position that, sure.
Yeah.
But that's why they'd make the deal, is because they believe that to be true.
Does this all now explain a little better why Elias wanted to wait on free agency? Have you drawn that line?
I mean, if he's...
Because it was so bizarre last year. Like, you've got a bag of cash sitting there. Why would you risk injury? And the narrative was, he wanted to see if the Vancouver Canucks could win. Yeah, I think that was part of it as well. Elias had been through a lot of shit in this organization, dysfunction.
So why did he sign when he did?
Ownership level, at the management level, at the coaching level. But I also wonder if it was part of, I just can't stand that guy, and I don't want to re-sign here long term.
So why did he then?
Well, I think he had his agents pushing him in that regard, and I think he probably got shook by Elias. We're getting trade calls on you.
Okay, so what I would say to that is, if that was the case, if he was so close to being like, I don't want to be here with that guy.
Well, and they were winning too, right? They were in the midst of a magical season.
Yeah.
So, but again, when you talk low simmer, I think low simmer could have easily been the case last year at the time he signed that, as much as it was when JT signed his extension.
No, but the time where you're saying he's not signing, so exactly 1 year ago, where he's not signed yet, and he's refusing to sign, if he's that close to wondering, if he's gone down his road, geez, I don't know if I can do it here. I don't want to sign right now because I don't know if I can withstand him. But then he signs. I think he's getting back to that point pretty quickly of, I want to get out of here. And with
but we've talked about it a million times, Blake. When you're a superstar player like that or a star player like that, you can sign and then force your way out.
Well, that's what I'm saying. He's now signed because he was at peace. To me, he's probably this close though to being hair triggered back to that point a year ago where he's wondering, should I sign here or not? If he was that close to it, he would get back to that space pretty quickly if things blew up. Things blew up. So if that narrative was true, I would think he's standing on his soapbox going, get me out of here. I knew I shouldn't have signed here. Get me out of here.
Well, I think his preference would be to stay and JT Miller to get the hell out of here. I think that's what's shaping up here. I think Elias is more than happy here if JT Miller is not in that room.
But if he was willing, if he was pushing and waiting to sign because he was thinking maybe I want to sign somewhere else.
And you know what? The agent's sitting there looking at the amount of money that's available to him, the possibility of injury, the fact that maybe a poor playoffs would cost him money or even a trade to Carolina. I would not be at all surprised if 2 veteran agents like that said to Elias, the other guy's a loose cannon. Don't worry. He will wear out his welcome. You'll get what you want. That all said, I saw Thomas Drance say he believes we're reaching a stage with the Canucks, a transitional stage of team building. Meaning,
a renovation?
Could there be a full makeover around Quinn Hughes?
I mean,
is the JT Miller, Elias Pettersson, and presumably a JT Miller trade just the first of many big dominoes to drop? Because Alvin, Rutherford, and Tocchet, although to a lesser extent Tocchet, we'll talk about his future here in a second, but Alvin and Rutherford look around and go, this core ain't it. It ain't ever happening with these guys.
Well, I mean, I think they're building around Quinn Hughes now anyway.
Well, of course, Quinn Hughes. That's what we've talked about. There's Quinn Hughes, and then there's everybody else in this organization. Everybody else.
Incidentally, the other small note we'll make as we preview the Sabres Canucks game, which there is a game tonight, by the way. Demko making his 3rd straight start is notable in that just in case you thought there was any sort of slight push away from Thatcher Demko.
Yeah,
I mean, Kevin Lankinen is healthy.
No.
They are seemingly committed to let's get our Vezina caliber Vezina caliber goalie back on track.
He wasn't busy, but it was a win. And as Tocchet said last week, and as Alvin said yesterday, they have got to get Thatcher Demko back. He has got to play a number of games here, at the very least, because, if you have any designs on doing anything this year, I think that's necessary. But also, again, going back to full team makeover, Thatcher going in the final year of his deal, you got to see how this knee responds, this popliteus responds, playing a starter's workload. You need that information on a go-forward basis to decide how you're going to deal with the asset that is Thatcher Demko going into the final year of a $5 million contract. Not to mention on Lankinen. I saw Dollywall reported they've been in touch with Lankinen's camp from the moment he was able to sign the extension on the 1st of January. Mm-hmm. No deal yet. Not surprised. Not surprised in the least. Kevin Lankinen and his agent, I'm sure, are going, we're going to hit a home run here in free agency. We have no reason to sign right now unless the Vancouver Canucks are going to pay Kevin Lankinen like a starting goaltender going forward. And I think the Vancouver Canucks probably have pause on that, and I don't blame them.
But I also think the Vancouver Canucks are thinking, listen, if our season is relatively lost here, we can maybe take a run at Lankinen come July 1st.
Or we could move him.
But but I'm saying in addition to, you could move him and then double back to him on July 1st if you relished him so much.
Almost never happens, but yeah, I hear you.
But the bigger priority for them might be, you know what, we'll just go find another goalie because we need to get something for the asset.
Okay, and then there's Rick Tocchet in his future, and if you're unaware, there is a mutual option on his contract for next year. The Canucks have their side of it, Rick has his side of it. I think it's fair to presume that if Tocchet is staying here, it's not with just the option executed on the Canucks end, that it's a contract extension that gives him a little more security, a little bit more money in the bank. Not to mention the wherewithal to say to the players, look, he's got a contract. So here's Patrick Alvin from yesterday on the job that Rick Tocchet has done.
Very proud of how Rick have handled the season here with under the circumstances. My relationship with him and the way we communicate every day and trying to find solutions, making our team better, pushing the right bottoms. I do believe that he's a good coach, and I see him long term too. Obviously, it's a two-way street there, but up to this point, there hasn't been an urgency for us to do anything with the club option. But I'm sure we're going to sit down and talk about it there.
I think Alvin and Tocchet are so aligned. I sort of hear that, and so far there hasn't been an urgency from the club's part, and I go, oof. I wonder if Patrick has been pushing that.
Pushing what?
Let's get Rick extended.
Oh, you think the club he's distancing himself from the club?
I could see the ownership saying, oh, fuck, we pay all these coaches not to coach. I don't want to extend them. We've been down that boulevard before, paying guys not to coach here. At one point, were they not paying Travis and Bruce not to coach here?
I think he was being inclusive. I think he was saying...
I hope so. I sure hope so.
I think he was saying, don't worry, I've got this. We're not worried that this is going to get out of control.
And, lest no one be confused, this isn't the front burner matter for you.
We just talked about the front burner matter.
Yeah, we sure did. And, look, Rick is saying all the right things as well. Here's Coach Tocchet from yesterday about his future.
So, God, my 24/7 energy is how do I get this team to play consistent. I honestly don't think about my future. I'm not lying. I don't worry about that sort of stuff. I'm a day-to-day, especially now where we're at. I just think of every day, how do I approach the new day? Whether it's a different game plan, we're playing Buffalo tomorrow, whether who's going to play, do I keep the same lines? I think that's the best approach for me personally, mentally, is to think that way.
100%, Coach. 100%. I don't for a minute believe that in his quiet, private moments there isn't a thought or two about, okay, I wonder what I'll be doing next year. But I think as we have talked about this matter from the start, and I know there will be those who are critical of the coach who will hate this statement, but I think the Vancouver Canucks need Rick Tocchet more than Rick Tocchet needs the Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah.
I mean, Saravelli has said that there will be a bunch of teams lining up to hire Rick Tocchet if he wants to coach next year and isn't coaching the Vancouver Canucks. Even wondered if there were teams that would fire their coach to hire Rick Tocchet.
For both the on-ice and the off-ice, I think people see him as a guy that can sell the game and a guy who's obviously been capable enough to win some games now. And he's evolved. He's learned.
He is a great people person who moves easily in big circles of people he doesn't even know, like with the media corps here. And, of course, I would suspect that he'd have opportunities in broadcasting, too, if he just wants to step away from the bench.
And despite the fact that I think even if you tapped into the market deeply, you'd find some criticism of deployment and tactics, I think they're easily explained by virtue of the locker room drama and all that's gone on within the organization. So all that would be caveated by that, and I think you step away and you're relatively scot-free in terms of a poor reputation, even if they missed the playoffs this year.
Yep. Yeah, because I think you can easily make the case.
Injuries and drama.
Some might be inclined to say, oh, look at the room. It's a mess. And Tocchet goes, yeah, have you ever dealt with these two?
Also,
one is completely unreachable, doesn't want to be talked to, wants to be left alone.
But also, Matt, there's documentation that pre-existed him.
Yeah.
There's documentation from Bruce Boudreau and others that it pre-existed Tocchet arriving.
Exactly.
He didn't lose control of it.
No.
It's always there.
Mm-hmm. The game day against Buffalo, every point now matters. We're in a playoff race here with Calgary and others. And Alvin was asked about that, how confident he is in that this is a playoff team. Here's what he had to say.
How confident are you that this is a playoff team?
As I said, and I go back to Jim, what he said, if everything goes right, that I'm very confident that this is a playoff team. And obviously, we had our challenges the first half here. So we definitely is up for it here now. And I do believe with guys coming back healthy and performing, I do believe that this group is capable of being a playoff team. That being said, we're not in the playoff right now, so we have to have a stronger second half and pick it up.
There is a lot of for those who said that Alvin's media availability yesterday was a nothing burger. I don't totally agree. I thought there were some strains that were interesting. I did not expect another fire and brimstone interview with Patrick Alvin. He shot a shot on New Year's Eve at Elias and at others, so he wasn't going to 3 weeks later come back.
Well, he's also more like
banging fist on table.
He's more likely to bare his soul in a one-on-one. I don't think he's ever going to do it too scathingly in a group setting like that.
And he's just he doesn't seem to me the personality type that he's going to bang fist on table time and time again. But there is a lot of wishful thinking in that answer. First of all, that you've been through a lot of adversity in the first half. Well, Patrick, that there's no quota here. It doesn't mean you can't have more in the second half, particularly if you're making a JT Miller trade. So, while I have one thought on the whole notion that we're here 45 games in and we're back to if everything goes right, I mean, that in and of itself is regression for the organization. But secondly, that the path forward after a JT Miller trade, if a JT Miller trade is happening, everything will go right. Because let's remember, before this JT Elias matter began, we were talking they're one, maybe two defensemen away, not to mention a winger away. Okay, maybe less than that to make the playoffs. But, I think that it's less likely that everything is going to go right from this point forward to the end of the season than it was at the beginning of last year. And that is quite a statement when you think of where the Canucks were at the beginning of last year and how so few had expectations for that club And if you did, you had, we're going to sneak into the playoffs expectations, not we're going to have 109 points and win the division expectations.
Yeah, maybe the season just came out of order. Maybe this was supposed to be last season
year,
and they just got it mixed up.
That's a good show.
I do want to make note of what's happening in the standings around them right now with regards to the urgency that the team might be feeling from Patrick Allvin on up, and talk it on up perhaps. And this is with no particularly cold spells with the teams behind them. They're kind of middling along as they have all season long. St. Louis Blues are tied with the Canucks in points. They've played 3 more games. The Canucks have 3 games in hand on the Blues. Utah is 3 points back of the Canucks. You think, that's pretty close. Canucks have a game in hand on them. Canucks are 5 points back of Kraken. So we're only going 3 teams back now of the Canucks. They're 5 teams up on the Kraken, 3 games in hand. So there's not a lot of push coming from behind on the Vancouver Canucks right now, despite all this. So they can sort of get their shit together in relative peace and quiet and start to climb some rungs on the ladder. Now at the top, it should also be noted, the Vegas Golden Knights have lost 4 games in a row in regulation. So with that in mind, the Canucks have 2 games in hand on them. Let's just go into a really fantastical world that they
I'm
won.
not sure I can entertain that today, Blake.
Let's pretend they were capable of winning back-to-back games. Let's say they won those 2 games in hand. The Canucks would be 8 points back of the division lead.
Mike, are you hearing this? God, I thought no one could be rosier colored than Patrick Allvin yesterday. Let's pretend that the team can win consecutive games, and then let's talk about it in the context of shooting for the top of the division. How many points are they back at Vegas?
If with those points, with those wins, those fantastical wins, they'd be 8.
The games in hand wins,
yes.
They're still 8 back. Oh, wow. Oh, okay.
But that's not crazy.
Don't forgive me if I don't rush out and make that futures bet on Bet365.
But your scoffing is notable in and of itself. The bar is so far on the floor, this guy can't even fathom.
No.
Back-to-back wins coming up.
My dad's a big stock market guy, and he likes to identify
trends.
The point of maximum pessimism. That's what I'm buying.
Oh, man.
Noah Hughes and Roenick are going to have to play a part here. Noah Strang edifies us here. Since the start of the 22-23 season, 5-on-5, 475 minutes apart for those two. Canucks outscored opponents 21-13, even while opponents outshot the Vancouver Canucks 251-182. Mark Friedman is in tonight, called up after called up yesterday when we knew Tyler Myers would be suspended. You mentioned Demko starts. And as predicted, the Canucks quarter-century team named by the NHL, there really wasn't a ton of debate on it.
No. Easily guessed.
Like both the 10 people and where they slotted, although Bieksa had a funny we're going to get to. Yeah, Henrik, Daniel Sedin, and Marcus Naslund, your forwards on the first team. Quinn Hughes and Alex Edler, your defensemen on the first team. Roberto Luongo, the goaltender. I mean, I saw some people quibble with Edler, but really,
I said
the totality of his career, all of it in this quarter century, right?
The only quibble I saw was Todd Bertuzzi off the second team, because Todd Bertuzzi, in those 3 key years of his career there in the early aughts, was top 5 in the league, of which Ryan Kessler has never been close to.
Kessler won an NHL trophy. Kessler had a longer run. JT Miller, Elias Pettersson, Ryan Kessler are your forwards on the second team. Matthias Ohlund, Kevin Bieksa, the defenseman, Thatcher Demko, the goaltender. What did Bieksa say?
Low key, if second team doesn't kill each other in practice, then we're running the first team out of the building.
Could you imagine? Elias, we've got you on a line with Ryan Kessler and JT Miller.
But don't worry, Kevin BX is on defense, so it should be quiet back there. What? Can you imagine those 5 guys?
If you get scared, just go run behind Matthias Ohlund.
And can you imagine Matthias Olin's face when he walks into that room and sees Matthias Olin's probably like,
well,
what?
The other thing, like, Bieksa was accustomed to having to put up with Kessler's shit,
yes.
right? Yeah, Olin looking around at all of this.
I got to put up with all this talking.
What? These two hate each other? And I got that asshole at center ice and this guy running around putting out fires?
And like whoopee cushions under the pillows, like
Olin's sitting there going, can we just get some professionalism on second team?
That's right.
Can anybody else just go play the game quietly and effectively and no drama?
I'd pay to see it. I'd pay to see it. Honestly.
Oh, I'd pay to see them do a panel. The five of them. Let's just talk. All right, everybody, let's get to our menu brought to you by Greta. We got the big Canucks Army watch party Thursday at 50 West Cordova. Greta. Doors at 5, puck drop at 6. It's all presented by Fountain Tire. Vancouver, Edmonton rivalry. We're going to raise some money for One Broken Bike, our charitable partner. Every ticket gets you in for exciting giveaways, including hockey tickets, signed memorabilia, jerseys to be won here. VIP 4-person reservation. Entry into the event gets a Greta Smash Burger. They're delicious, a drink, and a game card to play at the arcade. Nationgear.ca for your tickets there. Thursday at Greta, Canucks Army watch party between Edmonton and Vancouver. Please come join us. John Shannon's going to join us. Cam Robinson is going to join us. We talk about the suspensions, all sorts of destinations and trade combinations for Miller with Cam. Not to mention John with a really interesting shout about when you're trading a star player for component parts and a roadmap for the Vancouver Canucks to potentially follow there. Okay, Bet365 bets of the day. I got my over in the national championship game last night, and it happened pretty early. I was encouraged by Notre Dame's start. I was encouraged by Notre Dame's comeback, but they just did not play well enough in the middle 20, 30 minutes of the game to get a win. Did you win yesterday?
I did. The Penguins walked into L.A., got a 5-1 victory.
Go ahead then.
Oh, well, gee, thanks. So polite. I'm going to look at a invigorated angry elf.
Connor
Garland.
Connor won in
with a couple of points. It's a nonplussed Sabres team.
Yep.
Like, do they even have a pulse?
Yeah.
If there was ever a moment where the Canucks could actually score some goals,
this is it.
This might be it. Plus 375 for Connor Garland to get a couple
I'm
points.
in the same vein as you. We'll throw another fly into the ointment. A bad defensive team, veteran scorer like JT, right? Should have big eyes tonight. Miller as an anytime goal scorer, plus 300. Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets, so whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION when opening that account. John Shannon coming up next. Harrison Price from the historic Wall Center. John Shannon, the former executive producer, Hockey Night in Canada. His show, 100% Hockey, Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays with Darren Millard, the most famous man from Oliver, British Columbia. You have a take on the suspensions meted out here by George Peros and the Department of Player Safety on Myers and McDavid.
We all thought it was going to be two. I really do think that most of us said, it'll be 2 games because you don't want Myers, nor do you want McDavid involved in the rematch Thursday night at Edmonton. And I could see that. But at the same time, I'm having a difficult time arguing that 3 is the right number as well. When you look at the last 2 suspensions that Parros has given out in 2 separate situations, one to a Nashville player for slew footing, 3 games. To Siplikov, 3 games. Is this the league attempting to create a standard for attempted injury situations? It may be. I don't know that for sure. So it's one of those ones where you say, "Oh, I think it should have been 2, but I can't argue with 3." And in either scenario, I mean, did Tyler Myers and Tyler should be on the people's court, I think, tomorrow, based on his discussion yesterday about he started in his arms and worked his way up. He should say, "Yeah, I hit him in the head. I shouldn't have." And I think for the most part, he said that. Connor got tackled. Listen, Connor got tackled. Connor Garland did exactly what Connor Garland was supposed to do in that circumstance, and the referees didn't call it. Was it a mistake the referees didn't call it? Yeah, it was. It was a mistake they didn't call it. But that doesn't give Connor McDavid the right to hit a guy in the head with a stick. Was he ticked off? He was ticked off. But he does not have the right to hit a guy in the head with a stick. He just doesn't.
And for the 100th time, Connor McDavid, if he gets that call, does it even change the course of history? Because he wouldn't have known the arm was in the air. He still would have reacted, and the puck would have kept on going around on the Oilers' sticks, and time would have expired. I don't think that changes the world at all.
First of all, the Oilers controlled the play, so it would have been a delayed penalty in that. And who knows if Connor would have seen it, or would an Oiler player just flip the puck to a Canuck player to get the whistle and get the penalty? But you don't know that part. But I have a difficult time arguing with what you said too, because of the heat of the moment and the way the play of the game was going was all Oilers at that point.
But also, John, there's 10 seconds left in the game. You're going to give the puck away to get a whistle and go into a face-off circle with JT Miller, who's 80% of the dot that night, and maybe not get the puck back ever again? That would be folly to do that. So
it's a valid point.
And secondly, what happens if McDavid just punches, takes his stick hand over here, punches Connor Garland with his glove on? Do you think he even gets suspended at all?
I don't even think the play stops.
No.
I mean, based on the wrestling we saw and what Garland was doing to McDavid and the way it appears that Chris and Wes were managing the game, play doesn't stop at all.
No. What players don't get about the stick, as soon as you involve your stick, you are asking for trouble. A gloved punch, we've seen in the NHL, referees just giggle and push you away. It's nothing.
Yeah, so in my time at Sportsnet, and I had lots of friends in New York still at the league office, I would go on these tirades on whether it was Hockey Central at noon or even on our regional broadcast about how we have lost control of the stick as a weapon. And there should be more suspensions for sticks being hacked. And one of them was, remember when I think it was Sid got Mark Mathot on the hand and tore a little bit of Mathot's thumb off. We have to be, and we all talk about hits to the head being we have to manage that with concussion protocols. But the stick is such a weapon that we have to have more control over the stick. And I think that perhaps they're trying to do that in order to try to control that aspect. I can guarantee you, as soon as this interview gets put on the air, I'm going to get a text from somebody in the league and see, we're finally listening to you. It's only taken a decade.
I'm glad they're listening to us.
They listen to everything, Matty.
Do they really?
Don't you doubt
Gary,
that.
If that's the case, Gary, it's been a good 30 years. Can you resign and give somebody else an opportunity to run this league? Please.
They may not listen to that.
Asking for global hockey fans.
Come on, we got to get to 36 teams first.
They're big mad in Edmonton. Fans, media, players alike. Is it just pure partisanship and lobbying on behalf of Connor McDavid, or is there anything to Connor getting abused, not getting the fair share of calls, the league not protecting its superstars?
I don't. That's, this goes back to Mario's famous line in the 90s about a garage league, which I think got lost in translation, and he called it a garage league. I do think that what happens in the game of hockey, there are times where it's that old thinking process that everybody's equal. Whether you're a fourth liner or whether you're a sixth defenseman or whether you're a superstar, you're going to get treated the same way. There's no doubt that in other leagues, veteran superstars get calls. There's no doubt. LeBron gets every call he needs. Patrick Mahomes on the weekend. Seriously.
Saturday alone, Patrick Mahomes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I can see the frustration, but I'm not sure I want a league like that, Maddie. I'm not sure I do. The other issue is, and I have done enough Connor McDavid games to know that over the last decade, since Connor came in, no one has fought through checks better than Connor McDavid. No one has fought through checks better than him. And what that does do is that it doesn't look as bad as it is. And that's the human element of how Connor McDavid plays the game. So that when he fights through that check and we say, it should be a penalty, the referee on the ice says, well, he's still going. He's still fine.
Yep.
If that's the case, then Connor's, it's a typically Canadian thing. We always make things look so much better, and so we just keep doing the same thing. When he got slew-footed, what was it, 10 days ago? When the penalty wasn't levied on the ice, player safety went and said, you know what, that was slew-foot, and you deserve a fine. Suspension? I don't know. That's for player safety to decide the level. But there are times where Connor becomes his own worst enemy because he's so competitive and fights through so many checks.
And John, I'm 100% with you in terms of I don't want a league where if you go near or breathe on a superstar, you're going to get a penalty. The essence of hockey is fighting through, as you say. It's the spontaneous bounces of a frozen rubber disc in a confined space with big men playing it. That's the game, fighting through everything. Now, when there are legitimate penalties, they should be called. When he gets hooked on the wrists and stuff like that and impedes his stick handling, that should be called.
Connor Garland should have received a penalty.
Absolutely. As Ferraro said on the broadcast, I mean, that's 3 holding penalties. He absolutely. But there's a difference between what Connor Garland did and what for example, Duncan Keith with Daniel Sedin a number of years ago, where he takes a long run at him with the elbow up and cocked and hits him in the head.
Did he get suspended for that?
I believe so.
Okay.
Connor McDavid was being held. He wasn't being assaulted.
Well,
and I think there's a difference there that is eluding some in the Alberta capital.
Connor Garland did not get a suspension.
Right.
No.
Right.
No. He deserved a penalty.
And while
he even deserved 2 penalties.
And while I wouldn't agree with it, I would at least understand. If Connor Garland two-handed him in the ribs and McDavid responded with that cross-check, I mean, I'd still think that's reckless and you're still, I don't advise it, but I would understand it at the very least.
You're being held? Protect the head, boys. We have to protect the head.
Yeah.
We do. Bottom line.
For sure. For sure.
That's a baseline, protecting people's heads. And this is 2025. And we're not talking about Hal Lako on Rocket Richard. And for anybody under 30, look it up. We're not. Notice I got Hal Lako in there, the first Canucks head coach.
I think that was anyone under 70, John.
Hold on now. I'm under 70, and I remember.
I know Rocket, the other guy.
Well, that was so. What happened? Just for history, this was Hal Lako was the one who hit Rocket Richard, and then Richard turned around and hit Lako and got suspended for the playoffs. Hence the Richard riot.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, no. Now that you mention it, the name rings. It has been a while since in fact, the last time I encountered the Rocket Richard riots, it might have been in a chapter on Quebec separatism in Poli-Sci 101 at Carleton. So it's been a while. Okay, moving on.
Yes.
You have long. We're going to get you in more trouble now.
No, you're not.
You have long been a proponent. You're right. The league doesn't care about this one. You have long been a proponent of do not trade JT Miller.
Yes.
See if you can work it out. Are you resigned to them needing to trade JT Miller now? And what is your analysis of what seems to be a concerted Canucks effort to move JT Miller?
Well, I full confession, I have not talked to anybody in the organization since all the stories came out on the weekend, whether it be Dollywall and Drance or Elliott. I saw JT Miller play an outstanding game Saturday night, and that's JT Miller I want playing for me. I really do. It's funny. I in the last couple of days, I have talked to a few general managers. And quite frankly, two of them said, I am so happy they're having problems in Vancouver because it distracts everybody from every other team in the league that have same issues all the time. So can we please, so from that perspective, can it be managed? I do not know the inner workings of, Brian Bartlett's conversations with Patrick and Jim, whether it's, JT needs to find a new place. I don't believe he's asked for a trade. I don't know whether Pat Brisson has communicated that Elias does not want to be traded. But I just can't. I am shocked to think that two grown men can't work it out. I really am.
Well, what we're hearing now though is still we're starting to, even from Bruce Boudreau. I heard him last night on TSN talking about if the media just quieted down, I think that all this would go away and they could get past this. There is only one way that media would quiet down on this, is if both players started to play well. And their inability to play well, John, underscores that this is having an effect on their game. If you want to prove us wrong, go out there, guys, and start getting a point per game. And guess what? Everyone will stop talking about the fissure in the room because it won't matter. If you're winning hockey games and you're scoring, nobody will care that you guys don't get along. But when it seems to affect the on-ice play, that's where people lose their minds. And there seems to be this disconnect from people behind the closed doors that, no, people only care because it's affecting wins and losses. You put wins on the board, no one cares.
Well, the other thing is it went quiet for 2 years. And guess what? They still weren't right. So, no one here was talking about it in a public forum all that often.
Because they were winning.
They still weren't able to come to a functional professional relationship.
I'm not sure Bruce mentioned it last night, but when we had Bruce on the podcast last week, he said, oh, yeah, we had that problem when I was there.
Yeah,
right.
He admitted that the problem existed, but winning solves everything. And let's face it, the game in Winnipeg and the game against LA, all it did was exacerbate it because the team as a whole, not necessarily those two guys, although they made mistakes too. The team as a whole, but they were brutal both games. And so you're right. Had they after that great game in Toronto, had they beaten the Jets, had they beaten the Kings, we would not be having this conversation.
It would not be the temperature it's at. It wouldn't be at the temperature it's at. That's for damn sure.
You're bang on, Blake.
It's in their control is my point. If either one of them wants to get on a roll and start scoring, so it's in their control.
Okay, so your point of view is well noted. And I think we're all shocked that two grown men can work this out better too. But the reality of the situation is,
by the way, because every day at the Globe, or every day at 1040, and every day that Blake was at TSN, they got along with everybody all the time.
Oh yeah, all the time. Yeah. in the studio, John. In the studio.
Oh yes. Because my life in television was just milk and honeys every day.
Oh yeah. Hey, tell us about Bob and Harry. How'd they get along?
Now, Bob and Harry did like each other, for the record.
Ron and Don.
Yeah. Bob and Harry did like each other.
Do you believe in addition by subtraction on a Miller trade?
It only tell me what the subtraction is. Tell me, or
moving
tell me what
JT Miller out for.
Tell me what the addition is, rather. Tell me what the addition is.
So I'll give you the most recent example, right? Like the reporting was Filipino, Ryan Lindgren, and a first-round pick. That the Canucks and Rangers were talking about that deal, and it fell apart on Saturday. Now, I think that's a pretty underwhelming return for a first or a second-line center in JT Miller, but given the specific extenuating circumstances at play here, would you do that deal if you're the Canucks? Do you believe in addition by subtraction, try and improve the chemistry and the vibes in the room with JT somewhere else?
Does Pettersson exhale and go on a run?
Exactly. Whereas you may not be getting the same amount of talent back. Perhaps there's something to a sum of the parts theory, and at least give this team an opportunity to go forward and see if there's anything it can do in the spring. After resolving the soap opera that even Besser is now saying has, been difficult to get over when they're out there on the ice.
My answer to that is any trade like this has to be assumed that Pettersson will play better. Anything that happens to move Miller out, that has to be one of the assumptions that occurs.
Correct. So and there's no guarantees there, John. You're absolutely a 1,000,000% right on that, sir.
So then the other thing and this is just me, trades are very subjective. So to me, you trade a guy like JT Miller. When was the last time a really high level quality guy making about $9 million got traded for three pieces, and that team who got the three pieces won the trade? When was the last time that happened? Okay, the answer is the Winnipeg Jets. When PL Dubois got traded to Los Angeles for Kupari, Iafallo, and Velarde. So I think that's the measuring stick for any trade of that ilk. And that's my opinion. So that if anybody's sitting there saying, the Jets got three parts that could help their team almost right away. Now, it was a summertime trade, so Kevin had a lot more time to manage the situation with Rob Blake and tweak it. But so you have to, those are the things you have to consider. You need three parts that can help your team now, and you have to make the grandiose assumption that Elias Pettersson is going to go back to being a 100-point player.
1,000%.
And the assumption is a funny thing, because you're right. On one hand, you want to be very skeptical based on what we've seen that he can. And yet, John, of course, the previous 4 seasons combined is a much bigger sample size that tells you that he can be a 90-point player with his eyes closed. So, I don't know which instinct to go with.
And let's remember how last season ended for Pettersson.
Yeah, it was not strong ending. No, his last 12 months of calendar play has not been good. Yeah,
and the interpretation between management and, I hate using this word, and the player, so management and Pettersson, about how injured he was. Can you play through that pain? Boy, I was hurt. Mm-hmm. That's a relationship I think that needs to be remedied a little bit as well through all of this. So, God, I love it. And I can't cure. I can't even cure when I walk badly. But I gotta say that I find it so frustrating that you can't sit down with two grown men and point your finger at them and say, "Hey, you guys, fix it, fix this." You are making boatloads of money. You know, this is not as big a problem as the two of you are making it. It's not. Please solve it.
Yep.
And I can't believe Rick Tocchet's a strong character. Alvin's got a strong character. And Jimmy, we know Jimmy's got a strong character. For them not to
I
be
just
able
think
to
it's
remedy this. Wow.
And you know what, John? With any other personality, I think you're 100% right. With Tocchet and Rutherford there as the leaders, not to mention, you know, Elias seems like a reasonable guy. But I think that's just how big and forceful and unrelenting a personality JT Miller is. Brad Richardson told him years ago, if you ride that Pettersson kid the way I see you riding him, you're going to lose him. And it kept up. He gets benched against Nashville here on Grey Cup Sunday, and something happened. Because 2 days later, Tocchet gets asked, how's your relationship with JT? And he answers, you should ask him. So he is just a personality seemingly that is forever going to be in conflict, and perhaps has to be, that he thrives on conflict to play his best hockey. And I think when that sort of tour de force of personality is in your room long enough, he is going to grate on people, he's going to alienate people, and he is going to get to the point where the leaders in the room, the adults in the room say, we can't have this anymore. He was great for us, but it's time to move on. I think that's where we've arrived here all these years later with JT.
Boy.
Sad, but
I understand. I understand every word you're saying, but all I had to do was watch the Nashville series last year to know that, you know, they won in 5 games because JT Miller played some of the best hockey.
And John, I think if you could reduce winning a Stanley Cup to 4 playoff series and nobody had to see or work with each other the rest of the calendar year, I would have JT Miller on my team any day. But the problem is the 82 and the 6 months that precede those 4 best of sevens and 2 months. You have to get through them harmoniously. You have to get through them and into the playoffs, actually. You have to qualify for the playoffs, which they are not right now in a position where they would. So, I think he has all the hallmarks of a marvelous playoff player. I would take him over Pettersson in a 7-game series in a heartbeat. But long term, it's a 26-year-old two-way center against a 32-year-old two-way center.
I think
with personality problems, or at least with a personality that causes problems for others.
Right. I'm glad you rephrased that.
Correct.
And I think the 6-year gap is in the end the deciding point. I think the 6-year gap is the measure of a team saying, okay, how long are we invested with Miller? How long are we going to be invested with Pettersson?
I know you. I know
particularly because, like, if you're going to keep Miller, you need to win now. And I think they're looking at this season and going, I don't. This isn't a cup winner.
I know you say you haven't spoken to Jim Rutherford here, but you do know him. Do you think in his personality he's the kind of guy that would be like, we'll take a little less here just to solve the problem, or is he a stickler of this guy is worth this, and that's what I believe?
I think Jim Rutherford will do anything that will help the Vancouver Canucks. I'm not trying to evade the issue, but so if he feels that in any trade that they can get bodies that can help the Canucks win and win now as well as the future, then he'll take the deal.
But the win now,
you see him as a pragmatist, though,
very
right, John?
much.
Or okay,
by the way,
you used that word in the past with Jimmy, so I just thought
I do. I also see him very loyal. I see him very loyal to situations, which is why he came out in that first week of December and said, you know what, forget about all this discussion about Miller being traded. I see Jim's loyalty everywhere in his whole life, which is one of the reasons why all the trade discussion has kind of surprised me as quickly as it occurred. But again, there's a difference between that loyalty and being pragmatic about what's best for the Vancouver Canucks.
Do you think this management group, as they sit just out of the playoffs right now, do you think they still think they can win the Stanley Cup this year?
No, but I think they can be a playoff team.
And they think that, yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Yep.
You know, listen. This is not the only story of things that have gone wrong in Vancouver this year.
No. It has been a litany.
I just don't want people throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That's all I'm saying.
100%. You know, from Demko's injury to Joshua's cancer diagnosis to it has been one hit after the.
Come on.
Yeah, it has been one hit after another.
There's lots of talent on this team still. Lots of talent on this team still.
Mm-hmm. Fully agreed. Thank you, Shannon. Great hit.
Well, you know, as long as you guys are getting along with me, I'm okay. If you disagree with me, I'm going to demand a trade.
Well, I need someone to get along with because sure as hell ain't him.
True.
Cheers, boys.
See ya. If you are struggling with things like managing stress, anxiety, relationships, or divorce, reach out to the counselors at Advanced Counseling. Book your free initial consultation today at advancedcounseling.ca.
Sick Harrison Price from the historic Wall Center. This next segment brought to you by Ben Moss. 5 locations here in BC: Abbotsford, Chilliwack, Victoria, Willowbrook, and Langley. Coquitlam Center. This is a Canadian company, proudly Canadian-owned, operated, a history dating back more than 100 years. Committed to customer satisfaction. Check out the large selection of Canadian mined diamonds, lab-grown diamonds. They've got mined diamonds with payment plans to suit your needs. For information, check out benmoss.com. Ben Moss, because love is timeless. As we welcome in the Director of Content for Elite Prospects, our friend Cam Robinson. Caused quite a stir last week with this report about JT Miller and Quinn Hughes. And look where we are a week later. Cam, huh? Was this not foreseeable?
No, of course not, right? We put out that little tidbit last week. Everybody took it really calmly. It was very well received. I didn't get any hate.
Measured response.
Right. Absolutely, right? Like this is the Vancouver market. Nothing but level-headedness going on. But I get it, obviously, right? It's a hot market right now, and it's usually a pretty hot market, so it's extra hot.
Which dovetails into our poll question for today, actually, because, I think there's some people that would say, for the sake of Quinn Hughes and others in and around the room, addition by subtraction is part of the equation. Again, that's not for everybody, but I think for some measure or some part of the fan base and maybe some part of the organization, that is true. So we're asking people if they're willing to take less in hopes of just ending it all and possibly getting the addition by subtraction bump as well.
I think that's where they're at, regardless of whether management or the fan base wants it. I think that they've kind of reached that boiling point where they're like, we have to do something. They are, working diligently to get something done to move JT Miller. Obviously, it got very close with the Rangers on the weekend. But I put out that article yesterday where I chatted with 4 or 5 executives. I talked to some agents. I talked to some scouts, and I was just trying to get like a feel. And I put that in the article that from organizations that were very unlikely to be involved in this trade, because I wouldn't get a response from the other ones.
Right.
But it's not going to be a big return. I think everyone should wrap their head around that, right? I know that Larry Brooks in New York was saying like, oh, maybe it's Lafreniere or Braden Schneider. If that was the one of those players was involved, the deal's already done, right? Like people are like, oh, Dallas is involved. It's got to start with Logan Stankoven. No, it doesn't. It's just not going to be the case. And so, kind of the common theme from all these execs that I talked to and these agents were like, you get yourself a pretty good roster player, kind of a mid-level roster player, mid to late first, maybe you get like a secondary prospect, a B-level prospect. You call that a win in this circumstance because it's, he's an aging asset. He comes with a bit of the drama on the side, a bit of that baggage. And it's just, he has a no move clause. Vancouver's operating from a position of weakness. Everybody knows that they want to and they have to do something. And we've said it for years, right? Like opposing GMs, they're not throwing life preservers, right? They're throwing anchors when you're out there gasping for air. So nobody's lining up to put their best assets on the table, even though there are multiple teams still involved and kicking the tires, quite interestedly in bringing in JT Miller because he is a good player when he's on his game, an impactful player who can really help a contending team that looks to try to win over the next couple of years. So there are interests, but I don't I don't think it's at this point the addition by subtraction is kind of like moot. It's just like if they want to make a deal and get him out of there, it's just the return's going to be lesser than people are going to be happy with, including management, I'm sure.
Let's deal with the particulars of that Rangers trade. Hedel, Lindgren, and then some of the minor leaguers who got scratched. What are your thoughts on those players, Cam?
As I say, it's going to be a muted return. It's like that's a pretty muted return package there. Philip Hedel, I mean, he's 25, so there is runway left, but this is a guy who has like major concussion history. Like he has had serious concussion issues in the past. The production has been declining year over year. He kind of has this attitude that he's, or not attitude, but this perception that he's good defensively. He's not that great defensively. He doesn't kill penalties. He's a 40% career face-off guy, 4.4 million over 3 years. It's like, if that's the mid of the lineup player getting a return, I'm like, I guess that's okay. Lindgren, 26-year-old left-hand D, 6 foot. He's kind of been a staple with Adam Fox on that top pair there in New York. Has had good seasons defensively. This year isn't one of those seasons. He's really struggled defensively. And, brings nothing offensively. So he's not a righty. He doesn't bring anything offensively or puck moving, and the defense is kind of weak right now. And so it's not so great. On the prospect side of thing, Adam Sikora, he was one of my favorite prospects in that 22 class, super, super young in that draft class. So he just turned 20, already has a lot of experience in the AHL and is now starting to find his legs offensively. Loads of pace, loads of energy. I think he would fit in well with the group of prospects that they're bringing along as kind of a complementary third line type of projection. And then Kemmler he's 6'5". He skates well for his size. He can hit, he can fight a little bit, but like we're talking depth, bottom of the lineup projection sort of thing. So not a true asset in any sense. None of those are really true assets, even a conditional first, which apparently is what kind of blew up the deal anyways.
Yeah. I also saw that you tweeted, you have some doubts or you have some suspicions about the Carolina interest here. Explain.
Yeah, so I went off of when I said I'd be surprised when Elliot Friedman said that he didn't know, but he wondered about Carolina being kind of the team that's maybe sneaking into the front of the race here. And I just tweeted that I'd be surprised because it really doesn't fit their style of things. That they don't often go after older players with lots of term left on their deal. The only outlier of that is Brent Burns, who they brought in as an older player who still had multiple years left on his contract. But Burns, I know that they did that because he's such like a physical specimen that they projected that he would, outkick kind of traditional age norms and be still a productive player late and just like a great guy in the room, a great individual. It really would have filled in with their culture well. So they did that, but he's the outlier. And we know that they really were hard after Pettersson last year. I think that they went hard after him again this year. But, I had someone reach out to me and basically say, like, Carolina's interested in anything that gives them plus value. So if they smell blood in the water and they think that JT Miller is going to be had for a song, well, then they want to be the one doing the singing, right? They want to be the one pulling it in there for good value because worst case scenario, JT, is that, he becomes like a power play specialist and a winger in your top six, that you can still recoup a lot of that value and that impact on the ice in certain situations. And so, for the back half of what he has remaining on his deal, or 60% of that deal, I think he can provide that, and then they can swallow, the last year or two if the production really falls off a cliff when he's older. But if you can get him at a really discount price, I think Carolina, they have the assets to try to mix and match and put something together that might intrigue Vancouver. They have picks. They have a lot of things that they could work out to bring him in, and I think that he would elevate their team, adding another center, adding someone who can move on to the power play, a big physical body. I think that he's going to ramp up that dressing room a little bit too, and they have kind of the strength in their leadership group to kind of bring that in and have it be a smooth kind of slide in. So at this point, as of this morning, I've had enough people tell me that Carolina is definitely in on this, that I said I'd be surprised yesterday. I'm no longer surprised. So that was me on a miss.
Don't forget the faceoff specialist element to his game as well, which you wouldn't think would be, part of that dropping off the cliff when age definitely takes over. I think there's still obviously a chance they go back to the Rangers as well. Do you want Hedel in that package or not?
I mean, he's probably the best part of that package, even though I kind of just ripped him for everything he doesn't bring to the table. Because again, like, he's a player that I have liked in the past. It's just it's been a hard go, and with those concussion history, I just don't see how they're going to change that package up. If it was the conditions on the first and they go back to the Rangers, I assume that's the part of the deal that they're going to have to work on. The rest of it is kind of going to be solidified by and large. So if it goes back to the Rangers, then I imagine it's going to be Hedel, Lindgren as kind of the main pieces of that deal, because they really don't have any other options. I don't think it's going to be Zibanejad. I think that kind of is asked and answered on both ends by him and by the Canucks. And they don't really have any other centers on their team that would make a lot of sense.
Well, Trocheck, who has trade protection, and I'm also told is very close with JT Miller, like amongst his closest friends in hockey, and that maybe that is one of the reasons why.
Maybe another Rangers, Pittsburgh guy too. Is he a Pittsburgh
That's
guy?
it. They're both Pittsburgh. And so yes, I wouldn't suspect.
Do you switch it up though?
Well, I was going to ask, if it's Hedel and Keandre Miller, does that change the equation for you, Cam?
Absolutely, it does. I even have on my little notes here to talk to you guys. Give me Keandre. Yeah. I'll take Keandre Miller. It's in cap locks. I put it in big.
Okay, let me ask you this: Keandre and Hedel, or Keandre and a first that can help you flip and get a center elsewhere.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? That's the big thing, is that if you can use a first and Adam Sikora, something like they did with the Bo Horvat deal, right, where they salvaged that deal, which would have been, not so great if they didn't flip that for Hronek, and Hronek really kicked his coverage there. Is that if they can take those assets and flip them, then you might have something cooking here. But I think if you put Keandre Miller in the deal, he now becomes the centerpiece of that deal. And I think it probably changes the complexion of it greatly, the rest of the package, even though Keandre is having a bit of a down season himself. But it's been difficult in New York, right? Not many guys have been having great years there. So I think you pull him out of there. Again, he's a lefty, unfortunately. But I think long-term, the Canucks, they need both. They need guys on both sides. So.
Okay. I don't want to relitigate this in particular.
Oh God, I'm scared.
I'm excited.
I don't like it when he says that.
But I have heard this narrative now a couple of times with regards to that Bo Horvat trade, and I understand that Anthony Beauvillier did not work out here. I think they had higher hopes for Beauvillier. I think Alvin was persuaded by a strong playoff run or two that Beauvillier had, particularly against his Pittsburgh Penguins at the time. But they salvaged Anthony Beauvillier. Remember, they moved him for a pick that they later turned into Zadorov. Mm-hmm. They also, as Cam notes, the first-round pick that moved for Philip Hronek completely recast their team. We cannot undersell what Philip Hronek brought to this team. But even if they had kept the pick, it was Axel Sandin Pellikka, if I'm not mistaken, selected with that pick. Like, Sandin Pellikka and Atu Ratu for a half season of Bo Horvat. Remember, Bo was a free agent, right? That's not the worst return. Let's not castigate that trade. Why are you looking at me like that?
I don't think anyone's going to the wall saying that was going to be a bad trade.
Out to, again, I don't want to spend a ton of time relitigating this, but I don't think that trade was as bad as some are making.
Not bad. I think it was a nonplussed return.
Yeah. You might have been able to look at it as like even money if they had taken Sandin Pellikka, but like give me Phil Hronek over Axel Sandin Pellikka too.
Well, of course. He's a proven
certified
commodity.
exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, Sandin Pellikka was one of the best players at the World Juniors. Is one of the best defense prospects in the world right now.
Not bad. Not bad.
He's not
return.
that high up the list. Cam's not a fan.
I know.
Okay.
I know a lot of people love him, and he's got lots of offensive gear. I do question whether he's going to be like a top power play guy in the NHL, and if he's not, is his value going to be as high, right?
All right, moving right along.
Yes. Let's put that behind.
I have had my wrist slapped here, Rogerson, from both of them. Okay. Let's dig deeper a little bit on this since it has come into our orbit. A first-round pick. And the value of a first-round pick in 2025, and I've not yet seen it clearly reported that it was a 2025 first-round pick. But let's just assume
You'd have to think. You'd have to
well,
think. Because the other doesn't have as much value.
The thing is, okay, so again, one of the things I was told, the Rangers weren't comfortable with this trade when they moved it up to ownership. And I do wonder if that's because Rangers ownership is looking at it and go, okay, that pick is like number 13 right now if all goes to Hoyle. But if our season sinks, that's a top 10 pick, and where it's even a potential lottery pick where we could pull, accelerate all the way to the top of a draft.
In a bad
draft. So I can understand why if you're the Rangers, you'd want to put protections on that pick. But you tell me, Cam, like, what's the value of a first round pick this year from like 11 to 32? Presuming somebody wanted to put protection and top 10 protection, which is a common thing we see on a first round pick, they send Vancouver's way in a potential Miller deal.
I will say that when I was in Ottawa and kind of the Rangers were the team that everyone was talking about floating around Miller, that I was told that they would be dangling a 2026 just because of that fear. And at that time, they were probably even lower in the standings, which made a ton of sense, right? Is that you'd still probably put lottery protection on it for 26 because who knows with that aging core, even if you add JT Miller to that, you hope that that's going to push you up, but sometimes it doesn't. As far as this class goes, it's kind of a strange draft class, I would say. There's the top 5, and then there's a gap. And then it's like 10 to 20 is like a really big chunk of players. And I if I'm picking like 15 or 14, I'm probably not thrilled with any of them in this year's class compared to like Zibuya went 12 last year and he looks like he's going to be like a number 1. There's not those guys that are going to be sitting there this year in all likelihood. So there's still some nice pieces. There's still some centers. There's still going to be some D. A kid like Keyshawn Aitchison's going to probably be there, or another guy, an OHLer like Malcolm Spence. Braden Coots plays for the Thunderbirds, who's got flashes some really high end playmaking and skills. So there are players in that zone that I think are going to be like, oh, that's an A-rated prospect put into our pool. But you're not like getting up. You're not getting super excited about picking at 15, 16, 17. I mean, rarely are you, but it doesn't seem like there's going to be like a real steal at that zone.
Okay, good to know. And then lastly, buddy, because we know you do still follow these prospects after you evaluate them for all your draft work, Linus Karlsson, who has become Abbotsford's leading scorer, and like everybody on Abby and Fuego these days, they sweep that 6-game homestand, and Karlsson piled up big numbers alongside Ratu, who is the AHL Player of the Week. We've talked a ton about Ratu in the past. Forecast me Linus Karlsson, and especially in the context in terms of the year he's having here.
And we should clarify, leading scorer in points per game, not in total points or in goal scoring. All those are different players because it's a weird
spread
leadership group right
now.
now.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's Sheldon Dries who leads in goals.
No, it's Lekermaki leads in goals.
No. We're talking all time.
Oh!
We're talking all-time Abbotsford Canuck here.
Oh.
I know they've only been there a few seasons.
Yeah, okay.
So it's Sheldon Dries who leads in goals and Linus Karlsson who leads in points.
Oh, okay.
Nevertheless.
That's it.
There you go. Linus Karlsson, he is not a young man anymore in hockey terms. So the fact that he has not elevated into the NHL yet is not great for his long-term future. The fact that he is now really strongly producing the AHL is good. But if he had any chance of being a regular NHL player, he needs to produce. He needs to produce at like a super high level at his age. So racking up 10 points in 6 games over that winning streak, great news for him. Great for the program down there in Abbey. I still see him long term as kind of a depth piece. So someone who can come up when you need someone to. The foot speed has just never been his strength. He's improved it year over year, and I'll give him credit for that. He has, a really strong release. He knows how to get into the slot and let it go. But it's the difference between finding those pockets of space at the AHL level versus the NHL level. It is super difficult. And he's very, very unlikely to get put in those offensive roles to have that opportunity at the NHL level.
Tocchet praised his plumbing, his board work earlier in the season, though. So we'll see if maybe he can carve out that niche, because it may well be that some of these Abby Canucks are going to push for another look with the big club. Awesome stuff, Cam. Thank you for this. I much appreciate you being gentle on Axel Sandin Pelican.
He's a good kid, too. I almost got him a picture riding on one of his buddies' back after they won their quarterfinal match. I was pulling up my phone, and he jumped down. He's like, no, don't do it. Don't do it. I was like, all right.
What would you give up for good vibes?
Right?
Exactly.
There you go. Love the vibes.
Thanks, Cam.
All right, cheers, boys.
If you are struggling with things like managing stress, anxiety, relationships, or divorce, reach out to the counselors at Advanced Counseling. Book your free initial consultation today at advancedcounseling.ca.
So Harrison Price from the historic Wall Center, where if you're heading to a game in downtown Vancouver, make a staycation out of it. Book your stay here at the Wall. Call 604-331-1000. Ask for the Harrison Price rates. Some blackout dates apply based on availability. You can text us, 778-402-9680. Email live at scarsonprice.com. All of it to the Great Clips inbox. Great Clips.
It's going to be great.
Indeed. Hats off to Bo Lacumbo.
Yeah.
Linebacker with the BC Lions, who announces his retirement today after 10 professional seasons. 3 different separate stints here as a BC Lion for the pride of Abbotsford and Mowat. 9 of his 10 seasons were spent here with the Leos, drafted out of the University of Oregon, where he was a trailblazing player. Like, I remember discussing, I did a big feature story on him and his family back in the day in newspapers. And first of all, if you don't know the family story, well, Bo and his siblings, and they're 5, grew up in the Democratic Republic of Congo, formerly Zaire. There was a civil war going on. The father left the family, landed in Sherbrooke, Quebec, to basically establish a life here for his family, and brought everybody over. Bo was a trailblazing Canadian player because there weren't many Canadian outside linebackers who were making headway in major college football or the professional ranks. Like, 6'3", 230 and can run. Those guys don't grow on trees.
At a good football school.
And playing at a school that, was amongst the best. He tried the NFL in 2017. He came back in 2018. He was with the Alouettes in 2019. Then traded to Toronto for the canceled 2020 pandemic season. And you wonder, if the pandemic didn't cancel that season, would he have gotten back here to BC or gotten back here in time to win the 2021 Canadian Football League Most Outstanding Canadian Player? So that's the heights in which he hit. And anyone with the Lions will tell you that Bo has been front and center in the team's outreach programs, working with children, working in the schools, working in the charitable pursuits of the BC Lions. So just one of the best Canadian football players of his era, and an example of citizenry that the Lions and the CFL like to uphold. We're very lucky and should be proud to have him to count him amongst our own here as a Lion and as a British Columbian.
Just turned 34 at the end of the season, so
yeah,
that's about right for a linebacker. It's
Right.
hard to keep up the strength and the speed at that stage in the career. So he could have maybe redefined himself somewhere and hung on special teams or something.
That's it. I think the question going forward was, would he be willing just to be a special teamer? Right. And this move makes it all the less likely that the Canadians, that the Lions are going to start a Canadian linebacker. They have Ben Haddock, Vernon, who's been a very good player, but if you're going to start a Canadian, you typically need to have him supported with backups who can step in and play the role. They traded Ryder Varga out earlier this offseason, and now with Bo going, you really don't have anyone else who could be a backup middle linebacker on the team, even with the re-signing today of Isaiah Messam, who has been mostly a special teams guy, and when he's gone in the regular defense, 6'2", 220, not really your typical middle linebacker. So all the best to Bo going forward in his retirement. And then a really sad note, Tom McVie, a Rogers Arena regular, has passed away at the age of 89, a former head coach with the Winnipeg Jets, both WHA and NHL.
Which I read during the obits and honestly don't recall that at all. But I
ushered them into the NHL.
Yeah.
Won the championship in the WHA. Also coached with the Washington Capitals, New Jersey Devils. Found his way to Boston, where he was a 30-year member of that organization as a coach, a scout, an ambassador. Few could spin a story like Tom. He was a true character of the game. He had one of the most distinctive voices you will ever come across, a deep, raspy baritone. You could hear him anywhere. Really.
I remember getting into the Canucks press box for the first time and over the first couple of years, and well, the first few times anyway, I didn't know who it was. But I thought I was looking at somebody from Central Casting that had walked out of a period hockey piece,
Right.
you know? Like he was everything you think of a 50s, 60s hockey player, that was Tom McVie.
Yeah, well, right down to the fact that he played for the famous Chiefs of slapshot fame. You know, like
Johnstown at that point, or what were they?
Johnstown or Charlestown?
Yeah.
Sorry, it's Charlestown in the film.
Movie.
It's Johnstown. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So he was just a delight in the Rogers Arena press box for years and years. British Columbia, who matriculated, as we say, through these NHL organizations, and then back here to the West Coast. I've told this story before, but my first inkling that there might be trouble on June 15th, 2011. Do you remember they used to have a statue of Rick Hansen and a little sort of courtyard beside Rogers Arena where one of the towers is now, just off Pacific? And I walked out of morning skate that day, and I saw Tom and the entirety of his family, and what an awesome scene that was, and what an awesome day I'm sure they all had. So a huge number of family members and Tom were all taking photos there outside the arena, tons of Bruins jerseys on, things like that. And a guy drove by on a bike and sort of double-taked at the scene and then made a point to stop across the street and scream, "Fuck Boston." And, I looked at it and I was like, really, man? There's kids there, there's obviously a family scene playing out. It did not cross my mind in the least that there could be trouble on the streets of Vancouver following the game that night. And then when I heard that, it sort of focused me on, oh, wow. And then sure enough, we all know what happened thereafter. Anyways, to all of Tom's family, friends, coworkers, and gosh, there would be so many in the professional hockey world, our condolences. He was a true pleasure to be around. Okay. Results of the Surrey Mitsubishi poll question from Monday. Does JT Miller finish the season as a Canuck? 1,900 votes on this. Yes or no? What did the people say?
People said no.
Percentage?
66.
77. VJ, I voted yes and hope. It's not there's no hope for this season and for the next several. Only the cursed Vancouver Canucks could screw up 100-point power forward and fan favorite. Pathetic. Very disappointing. Grow up, guys. Work it out. Just shows how fragile and soft they are.
Don't disagree.
Colton says, no way with this drama can he. Alvin knows if you wait until the offseason, you lose essentially all leverage because of the Elias Pettersson no-move clause. It's a very good point. If this does leak to the offseason, your firm deadline is July 1st because at that point, Elias has leverage, and at that point, you're not peddling one or the other, right? If you think it can get back on the rails with JT here in that world, which I'm not sure exists anymore, but theoretically could still.
I think a massive run by the player has the potential to stuff the genie back in the bottle and put the pressure on Elias Pettersson.
Tim, I worry if we have another good player EP40 doesn't like, are we shipping them out too? No, absolutely not. I think after you make this move with Miller, you have to make it
It's a one-time coupon.
expressly clear. Yeah. And look, I'm not necessarily sure that ends everything with Elias and trade discussions. Would depend on, where this management group is at, where this ownership group is at.
Well, also, Matt,
they cast blame on both sides and say we're better off without the both of them.
Like, if they make this deal,
forward.
you're right. And Elias Pettersson sinks further post-trade deadline, is even worse. You're right. They might make a calculus of this is not good. Because at that point, you're talking a season and a half of poor play from Elias Pettersson.
And lastly, Cole says he can't now. Too much has leaked out to the media. Errors and omissions. I have a note here, 2 letters EK. Can't figure it out. I think it's Erik Karlsson. Did we screw up something on Erik Karlsson?
What would we have talked about that would have been wrong? It mentioned that he was possibly the first one to be traded out of Pittsburgh. Don't know where the
Anything on your side?
Quickly scanning here. No errors. No.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Appreciate you spending some time and connecting with us. Please do subscribe to all our assorted channels, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Blake is tracking the YouTube subscriptions. We got a chance at a milestone here today, so
We'll
please
let you know.
do right by Blake and subscribe if you haven't already. Follow on social, X, Insta, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky, live on many of those platforms at noon Pacific time weekdays. And, of course, support the community sponsors we keep telling you about and keep it local.